Welcome, everybody. Thank you for coming to our program. I'm going to first introduce Andrew, and he's going to introduce me, and Andrew's going to offer the talk tonight. So let me introduce Andrew Forbes. Gave me a cheat sheet. First point, he's a Dharma brat. Andrew also is and has been a New Yorker for quite some time, and he moved here after he graduated from Naropa University in 2011. He also is a recording artist and touring musician, and he has worked here at Sky Lake since 2021, which is how we got to know each other, and we decided to do something together, which is this weekend.
Thank you, Angie.
Thank you, Andrew.
And this is Angie Cho, who will be also teaching this weekend. And she's an accomplished architect and feng shui teacher. She's also been a student in the BTB, Black Tantric Buddhist lineage, for several years, and is a student and teacher of Shambhala art and Dharma art herself. I liked Angie from the first moment I met her. And we're very excited to be sharing these teachings with you this weekend. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming, everybody. It's so good to see you. I'd like to thank Angie for her support in really sort of nudging me to take this seat. And I'd like to thank Ilea for also being such a huge support of my creativity and inspiration. And I'd like to thank Irene for inviting me here to be a part of this world. And I'd like to thank all of you for being my friends and being part of my world. And I guess it wouldn't be proper first to say anything without first giving obeisance to all the Buddhas and Yidams and Dakinis, all the Dralas, the ancestors, to acknowledge all the people who have been through this land, the Lenape, the colonizers, the industrialists, and finally the hipsters, as being part of this magical place that we all live in. And as this is one of the darkest times I can remember living in, I think it's important that we recognize how precious this is for us to gather like this. So, I had just spent the last half hour in the teacher's suite upstairs, meticulously writing out a very detailed talk full of really juicy notes that was just coming through me like some kind of channel. And I grabbed my notes and put them in my pocket. You know, I'm feeling kind of nervous because this is kind of the first time for me. And I came downstairs and I walked in the room and Angie introduced me and I took out my notes and I opened them up and there's nothing written on them. So, just going to try and remember everything I wrote. So, this weekend is a celebration of my teacher, Jack Niland. Many of us in this room knew Jack. Many of us in this room may have known Jack for a long time. And my relationship with Jack was really just in the last 10 years of his life. And he had already kind of resigned himself to being a hermit, living in his tiny little studio apartment in Soho. And there were very few times I saw him teach in a class setting. Mostly my time with him was going over to his apartment, where he would host me and then indulge me in a waterfall of storytelling, of all these crazy stories that he would tell me about, you know, Trungpa, Rinpoche, and Shambhala, Vajradhatu in the early days, and how crazy everything was and how magical everything was. And I'm not particularly trying to sell you on anything with this tonight, though there was a time it was really magical to be a part of this community. And Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche was a magnet for all kinds of crazy things that would happen all the time. So, I guess the first place to start would be to talk about him a little bit. And, but maybe the first place to start is to talk about me a little bit. Now, just to make it clear, I am just trying to speak for the brilliance of what Jack taught me, what he showed me. I have no realization. I am totally, on all accounts and all comparisons to all great teachers, a complete charlatan. So, you know, I'm just trying to represent this kind of brilliance that Jack was, and I mean, he died about 2 years ago, right after I moved to Skylake. So, like Angie said, I grew up in the community. We're known as Dharma brats. There's a handful of us that were raised in this culture. And it's quite an unusual culture to be raised in. But when I was a kid, I thought it was totally normal. I thought everybody was raised Buddhist. I mean, it wasn't until I said that to some Christian preacher on the street that they told me I was going to hell or something, you know. But I became fascinated with meditation at a very young age, and in my teenage years did a lot of all the Shambhala training levels, and I did seminary when I was 19, I did my first Datum when I was 17, I became an MI when I was 21, and I went to Naropa to deepen my studies, and I got a degree in religious studies, and that was all very fun. But after all, when I was 26 years old and about to get my degree, I'm like, what is the point of all this? You know, why am I even learning all this stuff? I read the Kala Chakra Tantra and try to decipher it with all of the symbolism of Hindu Yoga Tantra and Sankhya and Vedanta. It's like, what is the point of just being this kind of receptacle of all this spiritual information? What am I going to do with it all anyway? I'm not like trying to start a cult or, you know, make a bunch of money with it. And then I heard a talk that was on the Chronicles website by Jack Niland called Solid Stories. And this talk flipped my perspective, and I realized the point is to create a world where people are inspired to tune into their own basic goodness, to their own sense of awakening. That's the way to share all of this stuff. And that is a great talk, and I couldn't find it online the other day, and I hope that the Chronicles get it back. But this guy, Jack Niland, was like the greatest orator that I'd heard talk about this stuff. And he had all these crazy stories to tell about how he met Trungpa and how Trungpa, and with all due respect, I just say Trungpa as if he's an artist, just like I would say Kerouac or Ginsberg or Van Gogh. You know, Trungpa Rinpoche was a brilliant artist who created a whole culture. And we'll talk a little bit about that tonight. I don't want to, there's so much that I can say about what I'm trying to open up here. And I definitely could talk all night and all weekend and all week and all month about all of this stuff. But I, unlike Jack, will try to restrain myself so that it's not just a waterfall of information that comes down pouring on you. We'll just try to start with the very basic, fundamental teaching that he gave me and that he received from Trungpa Rinpoche, which is this thing called the magic mirror. So when Jack, it's just a crazy story how it all comes together, but really when Jack was a hippie in San Francisco, and he was just trying to be a good hippie and learn, oh yeah, this is Jack right here, right behind me on the shrine. He was learning about the I Ching and the tarot, and like all good hippies, trying to memorize the I Ching and understand it. And he kept on throwing it, and one thing led to another, and he's on this road trip with his girlfriend, Sarah Kapp, who is a friend of ours, who was unfortunately unable to make it this evening. And he's sitting on a toilet seat in an outhouse at the end of a very long dock in Cape Cod, and he sees a beam of light come through the wall in this outhouse and hits the floor, and where it hits the floor is a penny. And he picks up the penny, and he's like, I don't know what I'm doing with my life on this crazy road trip, and I certainly don't like it in Cape Cod. You know, maybe I'll flip this penny 6 times and see if I get a reading. And so he flips it 6 times. Well, and he flips it more than 6 times. You actually have to flip it a number of times to get all the different combinations and all the lines. But he got solid line, 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 which is number 1 in the I Ching, the creative, which is also the sky. And so somehow this I Ching reading inspires him to open his mind to whatever happens. And sure enough, they get invited to drive up to Vermont, where they hear that the Dalai Lama is living and that you can just go visit him. And they're like, cool. And so they drive up to Vermont, and they end up in this place, this kind of dilapidated old barn house with mattresses everywhere, and it's completely messy, and there's like bugs in the corner, and they must have just gotten started, but this was Tail of the Tiger, now known as Karma Cholan. And they're like, what is this dump? And they walk up, and right before they knock on the door opens, and this woman appears, and she's like, who are you? And he's like, I'm an art guy. And she's like, come with me. And then, so he leaves his friends behind and goes with her into the building, which is, completely messy, and to a back room where he sees, kind of an Asian man with long black hair sitting at a table with several artistic implements in front of him and a piece of paper. And Jack is like, oh my God, this is the magician. He's sitting at this table, and he's got, the different elements in front of him, the coin and the wand and the cup and what's the other one? The
Pentacle.
The pentacle, yes, that's right. But in this case, Rinpoche has a pencil, a brush, some ink, an eraser, and a piece of paper. And they begin talking, and they talk about everything. They talk about, why girls are so pretty, and they talk about art, and all these questions that Jack had when he was growing up, where he became aware of the different ways that the ocular grids are set up in the eyes and the rods and the cones, so that certain things appear three-dimensional, and others is like Trungpa Rinpoche knew about all that. In fact, in Tibet, there's a practice where they can shoot blood into their eyelids and look at the sun and actually see all these grids, and that's what all the Tibetan tankas are based on. Like this tanka here, there are all these hidden grids behind it in its design, and if you look into its eyes for long enough and loosen your gaze, it will actually appear three-dimensional and come out at you. And these are all these kinds of artistic secrets that the Tibetans came up with. Anyway, this completely blew Jack's mind, and he ended up living at Karma Cholan, or at Tail of the Tiger. And it's around this time that he begins working on the door. And, Rinpoche wanted the door, which is a particularly big deal in feng shui practice, to be the proper entrance of the Dharma into the West. It was very important. So he had Jack first sand the door like crazy, and then prime it again and again and again, so that it was perfect white, brilliant white, like a piece of paper or a canvas. And this is when Rinpoche gave Jack this kind of teaching about the magic mirror. And how the magic mirror is like space. It's like looking into space and seeing what arises. And in so doing, you see everything that has ever happened, everything that is now, and everything that has yet to come. He gave Jack a secret formula of how to make money, to build banners, to make banners to ornament shrine rooms, to give shrine rooms kind of a psychedelic, experiential attribute which would allow a person to loosen their perceptions, to kind of sink into the Dharma that he was presenting. He created all these atmospheres that people could actually come to practice in and loosen their perceptions and loosen their, kind of let down their guard so that they could actually absorb what he was teaching and kind of let go of all the hang-ups that might keep them from practicing. And this is kind of how we ended up with this design of a shrine room. This is all kind of a formula that Rinpoche created, because there was no Buddhism in the West before he came along. I mean, there was Zen Buddhism in San Francisco. There was some Buddhism being taught in New York City. But more or less, he was the first person to create a culture of Dharma that now we all enjoy. And he understood that you can't just write a book and teach it in college for people to get it. He understood that if you want to change the world, you have to change the culture. And he understood that he had to create a new culture. I mean, our culture is, forgive me for saying so, it's completely mental. Our country is founded on deep trauma of heinous, evil things that have happened in order that we can actually enjoy a privileged life like we do. And we live in a world that is completely consumed with materialism. And not only that, but the kind of forces that govern that materialism understand the power of art and have transformed it into this colossal advertising marketing machine that preys on our desires and our anger and our insecurity in order to not just profit on it, but perpetuate it, to create a whole culture of insecurity and fear. And this is kind of the culture that we've all been raised in. And it creates mass illusion. I mean, it's pretty difficult to cut through that and to really even start to listen to our own hearts and minds. And what he started, and what I'm trying to share, is that incredible power of art, if we understand it from a point of view of understanding our own minds, understanding our own hearts, understanding our own Buddha nature, our own basic goodness, can be a cause for the generation of that kind of wakeful, benevolent, kind, and compassionate culture that, actually catches fire. Like it's contagious.
We have a lot of lovely fairies and gnomes and trolls from a very long time ago in our culture. Something good to think about.
And it seems that this culture of consumerism wants us to forget about that. It wants us to forget about the way that we can communicate with the world, that we can understand the world and hear it, and hear the language that it speaks. Not the world as some kind of abstract, but actually listen to the trees, and listen to the animals, and listen to the insects, and listen to the plants. They are talking to us constantly. They want to be communicated with. They want a relationship with us.
So true, so true.
And a lot of what the Shambhala teachings are about, that Rinpoche presented, first is about listening. And not just listening for something out there, but listening to our own hearts and feeling how vibrations, the little quakes of doubt, the little moments of aggression actually solidify our armor and keep us from actually hearing the song of nature. Not just nature, but nature, our own nature. So, in terms of my story, I moved to New York after I graduated in Trungpa, and I, was very into the Dharma. I went to the Kalachakra Abhisheka with the Dalai Lama, which was, a very cool, big festival in Washington, D.C. I did advanced training with my guru, the Chogyam, that summer, the scorpion seal, and entered into that kind of path of deeper Shambhala teachings. And then I moved to New York, and I swear, the moment that I drove onto Manhattan, this wave of anxiety just went. And I was like, ugh. And, but nonetheless, I didn't intend on staying, but things happened so fast. The next thing I knew, I was on a rooftop in Brooklyn with a Japanese beatboxer playing bagpipes to this crowd of people that were just going crazy. So I was like, I gotta stay. This is just too good. And so naturally I developed a relationship with the New York Shambhala Center and started going there and helping with it as I could. And on Children's Day, which is one of the Shambhala holidays, which happens on the winter solstice, is like a lot of what the Dharma art teachings are about are actually the holidays and how to celebrate them, how to write plays and put on pageants and make costumes and write songs and perform them, you know, in celebration of you know, the 8 Celtic holidays and the turning of the agricultural year. Children's Day is a celebration of children, where, you know, children get presents, and it's the kind of holiday where the king and queen of Shambhala host the children in a court that's bedecked with tapestries and banners, and the lion, tiger, Garuda, dragon come in, and there's a whole play and all these things, and it's great. It's amazing. I love it. It's like such an amazing part of our culture. And that's when I met Jack. And I was like, oh, Jack Niland. I quoted you in my thesis, which was about Dharma art, right, at Naropa. And so he's like, oh, that's great, you know, like, come hang out with me. And so I just became friends with him and would go over to his tiny little apartment in Soho, and then he would just tell me things for hours and hours and hours each time. And that's, you know, that's kind of, it was like the perfect follow-up and kind of a graduate study of all the things that I had studied at Naropa. And his view of Dharma art, which is really like a full spiritual path that is art as spirituality, it's something that can lead somebody to enlightenment in very much the same style as the 84 Mahasiddhas. It's like teaching somebody to appreciate what they do, their artistic discipline or their vocation, in such a way that it can teach them the essence of Buddhism. And in such a way, he was really into the fact that everything that you can study spiritually can be incorporated into this path. And that, in a sense, everything that we believe, whether it's aliens, or God, or gods, or goddesses, or even like hollow earth theory, can be incorporated into this kind of understanding of the vastness of imagination and creativity that goes way beyond anything that we could possibly understand in our little human worlds. And he turned me on to all sorts of stuff. He turned me on to all these writers, Philip K. Dick, John Steinbeck, you know, these writers who could actually illustrate with their writing entire universes, just telling one tiny little story that would illustrate a vast vision. And, you know, every time I came over, it was like I was some kind of ambassador. He would roll out the red carpet and there was a farmer's market chicken on the table, and just like coffee was hot and everything was just ready to go. Like, he really understood that if you're hosting somebody, you have to really just go all out. And that was one of the most beautiful things that he taught me. And would tell the most insane stories. A lot of them probably are not true. But they were really good stories nonetheless. Like he told me this great story that a young David Bowie, even before he was named David Bowie, was in Scotland in the 60s when Trungpa Rinpoche was at Samye Ling, establishing the first Tibetan Buddhist monastery in Scotland. And he was interested in Buddhism, and he was having an interview with a very young Trungpa Rinpoche. He must have been in his late 20s at the time. And David's like, I really am very connected to practice and meditation, and I'm really, I really think I would be, I really feel drawn to becoming a monk or, becoming a full-time practitioner, but I'm also a musician, and I really feel called to do that too, and it's very strong, and I think I should go for it. And Rinpoche agreed, and David's like, but there's an issue. I don't know what to call myself. What should my name be? And then Rinpoche's like, what are those big knives? And he's like, a Bowie knife? I've told that story to people and they're like, that's not how it happened. Or like how he made his girlfriend, Sarah Kapp, an international supermodel by taking this recipe that Rinpoche gave him. She was a struggling model. She was 26, and for models at the time, that's kind of like the end of your career. And he said, go to New York City and find a studio where we can make the banners, and I will give you a formula to make Sarah a successful model. And they go to New York and they find a studio and all these things, and then they the first thing that Rinpoche said was take all her old photos, all her portfolio, and just throw it away. Just throw it in the trash. So they did. And then he's like, find a designer and find a designer that you relate to and uplift it to embody a certain yidam. Use a yidam as, a yidam is like Green Tara over here, or Vajrayogini, it's a meditation deity. And connect the two as you restyle it. And sure enough, they see that Valentino, a very successful designer from Milan, was in town. I'm maybe a little like shaking on those details, but Valentino was in town doing a cattle call for models. And so they see that this is the opportunity, and they go to Filing's basement and they actually find one of his outfits, and they cut her hair and they dye it to match, they dye it purple to match the outfit, and they kind of cut up the outfit a little bit to make it sharp, because they relate to like Mahakala. They want it to be a wrathful warrior goddess. Mahakala is in that little picture on that wall. And and give her this fierce look, you know, with like makeup going. And, you know, they go there and there's like 1,000 models there. And she's wearing this outfit that they had just done up. And when it's her turn to go in, she just swallows all the courage that she can and just struts in like she owns the place. And he is like, whoa, who are you? And she's like, I'm your new muse. I'm your new muse. And then he says, how old are you? She says, 18. And the next thing she knew, she was on an island in the Mediterranean, you know, with money just pouring through her, that they were able to fundraise enough to get the first banners made for the seminary. That happened that year in 1973. And that is a true story. That did actually happen. So that's how I came into this particular lineage of Dharma art. When Rinpoche was first teaching in the West, and there was no Buddhism, there wasn't even meditation. All he was teaching was art. It was the very beginning. Very first teachings that Trungpa Rinpoche ever gave was all art-based. And these, of course, became, you know, the teachings of Dharma art, and then eventually visual Dharma and mudra space awareness and the Maitri rooms and all these things that incorporate, and Ikebana, of course, which Trungpa was a master of. But more to the point, this particular approach to spirituality, it's not something that's going to help you, like, calm down or be more focused at work. It's kind of more basic than that. This isn't, I'm not trying to like offer some sort of solution to anyone's particular issue. This is much more basic than that. This is, we're getting not to something any other than what is already here. And many of us in this room are practicing artists, we're musicians, we're painters, we're poets, we're farmers. We know that we kind of already know what I'm about to teach, what I'm about to go into. I'm just trying to bring it out in a way that we can appreciate it for what it is, which is really the essence of our humanity. The very core of who we are as human beings. And what we're really looking at, which is really the same thing with any school of Buddhism, is we're looking at the mind, how the mind works, when we're receptive, when we're creative, when we're open, when we're closed. And there's really kind of no better analogy to the mind than crystal ball. Crystal ball is empty but solid. It radiates light at the same time as contains it. It reflects everything from all directions without any manipulation at all. So when we're meditating, this is what we're uncovering. This is our true nature. And that's what we're going to be exploring this weekend. Only it's the true nature of our creativity and how that applies to all of our different artistic disciplines. So, I'm not going to teach on the magic mirror tonight. I mean, tomorrow, that's what we're going to do tomorrow. For those of you who have come to the weekend. But as a little preamble, I'm offering a meditation exercise because we're going to be looking into space. Perhaps we could look into space in a way that loosens up our awareness a little bit. And this is an exercise that I developed based on the Book of Five Rings by Miyamoto Musashi, who was a brilliant swordsman in Japan in the 17th century, who died of old age, which is almost unheard of for a samurai. And he fought and won almost all of his battles with a wooden sword. And he wrote this brilliant book called the Book of Five Rings, Book of Strategy. And this is a practice that I developed for Kassan practice, which is like a protector practice to extend awareness. So perhaps normally we do it standing up, but we could just do it sitting here. So let's all take like a good posture. Well, you know what we forgot to do at the beginning? Or I forgot to do? Is bow. So let's bow. You'll have to forgive me. I'm a little bit nervous. So let's just have our eyes open. And we're looking out straight ahead. And you have no particular focus in your gaze. Your loose gaze allows you to see the whole room in front of you. And you can look up without moving your eyes, see what's above you in your field of vision. your vision to the left side of your vision. And now, coming back to the center, without moving your head or your eyes, look 90 degrees to the right of you. Look 90 degrees to the left of you. Look behind you, as if you have eyes on the back of your head. Look directly above you. Look below. And now look in all those directions, all at once. And then gently come back. Looking into space. Like looking into the space between you and the computer screen. Trungpa Rinpoche would say, space is solid. Forms are hollow. So, I'd love to open it up. If anybody has anything they'd like to share, any questions, it'd be great to conversate about this. And I actually don't know if anything I've said has made any sense at all.
Andrew, what was the saying? Space is solid and forms are
Hollow.
hollow.
Could you say something, please, about how music fits into all of this? Because I'm very aware, it seems to be an emphasis on form and decoration and tankas and things. I wonder how, I'd love to hear how, maybe if it's possible, Rinpoche, Chogyam Rinpoche, incorporating your work with music and musicians?
I'm so glad you asked. Well, Rinpoche listens famously to mostly classical music, but he was also a big fan of Texas Hillbilly and honky tonk. He said even that country western music is the voice of the Dharma.
Yes, agree.
But that's about the limit of his kind of musical. He wasn't particularly a musician, and he had a few, notable teachers that came out of his Dharma art lineage, like Jerry Gurnelli and Robin Ford. And
Peter Lieberson.
and Peter Lieberson,
Yeah.
and
Steve Gordon.
and Steve Gorn, and Rachel Farrow.
Andrew Forbes.
Well,
Bill Douglas.
I'm a generational gap there.
Really?
David Nixon.
Oh, yeah.
Nick Jordan and Bill Douglas.
Yeah, and Bill Douglas, that's right. And Mark,
Miller.
Mark Miller, yes, Mark Miller. And if you talk to them, especially to Jerry Gurnelli, who can't really talk to anymore because he has left this mortal coil, they talk about space. They talk about rhythm as space. That was one of Jerry's big things. And this is actually how I have been able to incorporate this teaching of the magic mirror into my life and to understand it in a way that became very alive for me and allowed me to embrace this kind of artistic spiritual path. And this is like, I don't know, should I tell this story right now? The crazy story about San Francisco and all that.
Let's do it. It's a long one.
Yeah.
Well, now we're really wanting to hear it.
I probably told it to many before.
I mean, it is a good story. Oh, I'm gonna get there.
Totally psychedelic. But the way that I've come to understand it is that rhythm is space. The moment between each beat is space. And you can focus on the beat itself and try to get it right. Or you can actually let your mind rest in the space between. And from that space, the gravity of the notes begins to communicate. And it's as if everything begins to fall seamlessly into place. You're no longer trying to get it right, but you are actually resting in that space as the music pours out of you. And it's not like a particularly new thing. I mean, if you talk to any musician, that's kind of, they're like, oh yeah, the flow. Entering into that flow. flow state. But, I mean, in my understanding, any music that's good has that flow state. And that could be any kind of music. But the moment that it kind of falls out of that, then, you know, it kind of loses its power. There's a certain, I saw Santana last year at Bethel Woods. He had the largest rhythm section I'd ever seen. You know, drums all over the stage, and it was so powerful. Oh my God, the whole place, I danced my ass off for like 3 hours. And afterwards, like, rain came down. You know, the perfect kind of blessing rain. Anyway, there's a tremendous amount of magic in music itself. Music is magic. It's a way of seeing how the creative and the receptive natures of our minds play openly. If only we have the technique and the will to bring it out, which demands a tremendous amount of practice and becoming so comfortable with a very gentle way of relating to our own minds. Like musicians, every musician I've ever met is extremely sensitive, extremely gentle, touching on the most subtle aspects, you know. And I heard my friend Stevie Brooks say that he read somewhere in some Buddhist text, may have been the Jewel Ornament of Liberation, that Gampopa said somewhere that musicians are already enlightened. But I looked high and low for that quote, I couldn't find it.
Somebody said.
And I don't know, they're certainly not talking about me.
But excuse me, may I ask a follow-up question? Did Rinpoche listen to live musicians?
He would actually, in the early days, when he had a little more freedom and liberality with his actions, before he became, you know, Trungpa or Rinpoche, he would get dressed up like a cowboy and go to the hockey top and go line dancing. Well, he couldn't really line dance because he was half paralyzed. But other than that, I'm really not sure. These are just the crazy stories that Jack told me.
The crazy story I heard was of I've forgotten her name, I think her name is Madeline or somebody, she was a pianist.
Madame Bruiser, another musician.
And she was playing, so I'm just, it's like third or fourth or fifth hand, this story, but I've never forgotten it. She was playing, the lid of the piano was up, like on a grand piano, and he put a dog, a terrier, on the lid of the piano and let this, while she was playing, and let the dog slide down the lid.
Yeah.
Is that, have you heard that story too? Steve? Something like that?
I think that's just an example of the way in which he worked with people, cutting through their sense of what they thought they were doing. And he did the same thing when he put a meditation bowl over Robert Bly's head.
You mean a gong thing?
A gong, yeah. I mean, these were just ways to kind of work people up.
Thank you. Yeah.
I mean, he was an artist, but where that really manifested was in poetry, calligraphy, ikebana, space awareness, but it wasn't as much in music, I would say.
Mhm.
Yeah. I
Can't
mean,
do everything.
You'd have to say fashion.
But,
I think you have to say
Yeah,
fashion.
and fashion,
Very true.
yeah, definitely, oh, yeah, definitely.
Clothing.
Well,
Like-
yeah,
yeah, fashion,
yeah,
theater,
design.
he
Theater,
was
yeah.
big into theater,
Yeah.
photography, filmmaking,
Of all these, music was the least.
yeah. I mean, that leads me to another point, it's like, he understood that media was the way to transform culture, like, culture itself is in all these different medias, all these different forms, this is how we kind of create our world, and he got his fingers into every single one of that he could. I mean, music, he didn't really have a musical ear, and there's that famous recording of him singing the
He
Shambhala
could break
anthem.
your heart singing the
Yeah.
Shambhala anthem, yeah.
Where he's completely out of tune the whole time. But yeah, he understood that media is information. And all the information that we can actually learn about Buddhism and the Dharma, we can incorporate into media. And that's how we can create a culture of Buddhism, of Dharma in the world. He said, if you want to change the world, change the culture. If you want to change the culture, you have to change the art. And if you want to change the art, you have to change the way art is taught. And you have to teach it. You have to teach that change of art to girls, because girls rule the world.
Yes.
He also worked color in a way that was quite amazing. And with Jack, he gave him colors with Pantone, and everything that was done came through Pantone colors, so that it would get printed, and there was like a real precision about how the banners were made, specific color. And he had a very strong feeling for certain colors.
There's, yeah, the teachings on color are amazing. Some colors pop out at you. Some colors draw you in. Like the difference of these two blues is this blue is very inviting and this blue is very like poppy. You know? And the formula of how to create the banners, which actually create the environment that invoke the three kayas, is an incredible teaching. But that, my friends, is for another time.
Would you say that Jack was the, it seemed to me he was the primary person that Trungpa was able to really kind of play with, to be able to articulate a lot of things that you've been touching on.
Well, the thing about it is, Jack was one of Trungpa Rinpoche's very first Western students, even before anybody really knew that they were his students. Because he was just, you know, he dressed like a hippie. Everybody knew that this guy was, you know, brilliant, but they didn't know that he was like a great, you know, reincarnated Buddhist teacher. And they could talk to him about anything, and he was fascinated. You know, he was fascinated with them. He's coming from a completely different culture, and he's learning everything he can about American culture. And everybody is totally into him because he's super far out. I mean, after Ilea and I watched that documentary Crazy Wisdom, which is really a devotional documentary about his students, she was like, he was an alien. And he came down to Earth. And he just fell in love with humanity. You know, it's like from a completely different planet, different galaxy altogether. It's like, So, what I mean to say is that Jack and Trungpa were friends, and they could talk about anything. Like, they were very open with each other, and they kept that relationship the whole time. You know, they'd always be telling each other jokes, and, you know, like, catching up on old times, and, you know, it was very, an informal relationship. I mean, I could go on and tell you more crazy stories about how informal, but I'm not going to. And Jack's got this great story that he tells that's on YouTube about the 1975 Merwin seminary incident. It's crazy. I mean, his telling of the story is really crazy. That's a whole historical thing that we don't have to get into.
Was Jack actually an artist in some form or other?
Well, these two pictures that I put next to the shrine are his Tonka paintings.
Oh.
So he had, by order of Rinpoche, developed a Western style of making Tonkas. They're certainly more cartoony, but they're also incredibly inspiring. And I've put up Jack's art kind of all over the place. In the dining room, I've put up several of his Jack's Cats series, where he would make these little cards and then take pictures of them and send them to people, you know, of cats, because he loved cats. But Jack was a painter. He went to Cooper Union, and very talented, very brilliant. I mean, what he did particularly in the beginning was silk screening. I mean, creating all the banners and drawing all of the symbols that were then silk screened on all those banners. And Tiger Migrant with a Dragon, and all those motifs, you know, he drew those. And then he silk screened them and mass produced them so that, you know, there was a look that Rinpoche was going for. I mean, Rinpoche was trying to create a whole new look. It was kind of like science fiction, you know, a futuristic view of like fashion and style and architecture and everything. He wanted to completely transform the way that everything looked. And the original sort of Dharma art recipe was that it was done with a Japanese sense of space and a Tibetan sense of color with Western materials in an American scale.
Which allowed for interpretation, really.
Yeah, that opens it up for sure.
It wasn't static. When I would talk to him about color, it was always not trendy, but it wasn't static. That's interesting.
Can you say more about that?
When we were talking about redoing the center in New York, the colors, I was kind of trying to kind of break what I saw in many other centers a little bit, move off center, just to kind of like shift your eyes and play with the light that was actually available in some of those rooms, which was very limited. And he talked about the banners that he would have liked to have done, and he did a couple for us that would kind of follow in the same vein. But he, he's very aware that there was, architects that were helping with most of the centers, and so there was this kind of uniformity. But there's the Western influence, like, of using the materials, right? And then, but this kind of background of Tibetan aesthetics there was interpretation in it. And so it was kind of nice because as a Sangha member and not as a direct student of Trungpa, I got to actually, be part of something, right? And so we all got to be part of something.
Mm-hmm.
there was like room for us. It wasn't like cookie cutter.
Yeah.
Which is, I'm sure, what maybe was intended. Right?
Yeah, I mean, I think Trungpa Rinpoche wanted his students to like keep evolving,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Mm-hmm.
to keep growing and changing and modifying, and you know, and he saw that there was no corner of culture that couldn't be absorbed by the Dharma.
Mm-hmm.
And he wrote this really interesting little science fiction book called The Memoirs of Cerny Masanko. It's out of print and hard to find. But in it, he basically, you know, tells a story about a futuristic Shambhala world. And you'll notice, if you're paying attention, that there's all kinds of product placement of like white conch, you know, soap, and like Garuda, well, there is a Garuda Airlines, but you know, like, or Windhorse shampoo, or, you know, like Windhorse automobiles, like all these different attributes of the different elements of Shambhala culture were implemented in the very ordinary things. And that's how we can actually transform culture. It's very ordinary. And that inspiration is still alive, you know. For people like you and I and all of us, is like we can create the world. Like Ralph Waldo Emerson said, we can create our own world. We can create a world that communicates these things that we treasure as we study the Dharma. That could, in effect, I mean, I don't mean to like, you know, blow a trumpet or anything, or, you know, sound a bagpipe, but it could change the world, you know? And it has, already.
Really?
Yes, slowly, little by little, yes. Yes. With patience.
Well, like I was saying, there's a huge force that is kind of co-opting all of the material stuff. And there's a way that we could actually rebrand all of it.
Yeah.
Well, it's art in everyday life. And that's what Rinpoche said.
Yeah. I mean, that's exactly what we're talking about. And how to make our own lives a work of art. Our own lives a work of Dharma art. So, like I was saying, one of the things that Jack really communicated very strongly to me is that when I came to visit him, for him to tell me endless stories and give me Dharma art teachings and stuff, he really rolled out the red carpet and cooked all sorts of things for me to enjoy. So, in that spirit, and since all of you have come to, you know, hear me and Angie talk about these things, we spent the day preparing some food. And we have some refreshments, and we'd like to share them with you all. And I hope that sounds good. But once again, what a pleasure this has been. And for those of you that are staying the weekend, this is really exciting. I mean, we didn't think that anybody was gonna come, and now we gotta do something.
That's great.
But to close this section of the evening, let's have a bow. Please, join us in the dining room.
Well, you certainly got the hospitality transmission from Jack.
I think it's Sarah too, Sarah.
And Sarah.
Always rolling around.
Yeah.
It was nice, so we were getting there. Yeah, it was fun.
I'm actually staying overnight.
Sure.